So tonight's ceremony is about the winter solstice and Yule and the traditions across the world that people have to celebrate the winter solstice and have for thousands of years. But tonight we are mostly from me and from what I'm going to teach and talk about, we are mostly going to focus on Celtic traditions and Arabic traditions. But during during our talk and during the stories that I'm going to tell and during our discussion, I would love to hear if anybody else knows any stories and traditions for the winter solstice from other places across the world, because there are hundreds of thousands of different traditions and ceremonies and rituals and all kinds of things that people do all across the world for winter solstice. Um, so I'm going to start with the Middle Eastern, specifically Arabic traditions surrounding the winter solstice, pagan traditions that predate Islam and predate Christianity and some predate Judaism as well. Um, and the first one we are going to talk about is something that we are kind of doing a certain form of. And I think it's really cute because so many different countries across the world, 4,000 years ago, not only were using different types of food to give gifts to each other to help each other make it through the winter, but even thousands of years ago, we were also thinking about the animals and making sure that the animals made it through the winter. Now, that was for different reasons. It's not always because we find them to be cute and adorable and want to help them make it through the winter, because we are empathetic and we love animals, but also because animals surviving the winter helps to sustain the ecosystem. It also helps to sustain hunting the next year. It also helps to sustain crops and the soil and fertilization and all kinds of things. The animals are necessary for the ecosystem and have been for obviously forever. So one of the reasons that people have always gone out of their way to make sure that the animals in their societies and in their villages, one of the ways that they have helped them to survive the winter is by decorating the trees outside with food for the animals. And it depends on what region you're in, but this was done all the way from the Middle East through Europe and through Central and South America. And you find traditions where they are outside feeding the animals right after winter solstice in almost every country across the world. And I find that to be really cool and very fascinating. And so there is a specific story and specific tradition that I wanted to talk about from Celtic culture, and then a story that I would like to talk about from Arabic culture. So I have no idea if I'm pronouncing this correctly, and usually I go out of my way to make sure I am, but I was lazy with this word and didn't. So I'm going to put it in the chat before I attempt, so all of you can see what I'm attempting. It's not that hard. It's just that when things are from Ireland, sometimes the vowels and consonants don't make the sounds that you think that they're going to make, especially old Celtic Irish and Welsh and the different languages that exist up through the UK and through different areas. As an American, I'm not amazing at pronouncing them. So anyway, we are going to discuss and talk about the Callanish stones. And please, oops, I spelled it wrong. Please let me know if you do know how to pronounce that and if I am pronouncing it correctly. It looks easy, but anyway. So the Callanish stones. First, does anybody know what the Callanish stones from Ireland are and what the story behind them is?
You pronounce it right, Alex.
Oh, thank you. Good.
I've got Irish background.
Oh, awesome. Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so Kalani stones.
He's looking it up.
Well, what
That's
do I
it.
do?
It's referring to
Um,
standing stones, right?
The what?
It's referring to the standing stones?
Yes, yes,
yeah.
it is. Yep.
Okay, so Alex, you're probably going to correct me here. I I can't remember whether it's either 12, 13, or 14 stones. There's a
Very good.
center stone, then
It's 13, just so you know. It's 13.
okay, yeah, and then there's also like a okay, they don't call it a road, but there's a line of stones that come into the main center stone, the main stone circle, as
Yep.
well as lines that go off to the left, to the right, and north, east, and south that come into it that are actually not magnetic but true north, east, and south. They're aligned on the true points of the compass, not the magnetic. So there's 13 degrees difference.
Exactly. Yep.
And then I'm going to let you finish. I'll let you finish off the rest.
That's pretty good.
Oh, and one really, 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 really big thing about it. There was a tomb in there.
Yes, there was. Yes. Awesome. Well, I'm so happy that you guys know what I'm talking about, which is just awesome. And I wrote down a lot of notes, so I have to have my notes in front of me. So the Kalanish stones are on the Isle of Lewis, and they were believed to have been put up 2,900 between 2,900 and 2,600 BCE, and comprise a stone circle with 13 stones, 12 meters wide, with a monolith in the middle, just like Paul said. With standing nearly 5 meters tall. And then radiating out from the middle, you have 5 rows of standing stones with 2 parallel rows running 80 meters north-northeast and 3 running east-southwest to form a Celtic cross. They are aligned with various movements in the solar system. Specifically, one of the ones that they're most known for is following and tracking the sun. So these stones, number one of the reasons we're discussing it and talking about it for the winter solstice is that during the winter solstice, the sun sits in a very specific place on these stones. We're going to talk about that. So the main circle is aligned with the winter solstice. And with the winter solstice sunset specifically. So when the sun sets during the solstice, being the longest night of the year. And obviously this held extreme spiritual significance due to all of the festivals that we know that are celebrated in Celtic pagan tradition for the winter solstice. And if you guys have ever sat down and you and your friends, because many witches do this, but you've ever sat down and had a conversation about how crazy it is that Christmas seems to have so many relations to the winter solstice or to Yule. Normally what they are talking about when they say that there are so many similarities is Celtic and Norse traditions. When they say that they have so many similarities, I know it's funny that that's a pet peeve of mine, but it is because it's just such a common topic to have throughout pagan discussions. And yes, it's true that many traditions throughout Europe are very similar to Christmas, and the reason for that is colonization and conversion. Um, and we're gonna talk about that too. But it is not similar to the traditions found in the Middle East. It is not similar to the traditions found in Africa. It is not similar to the traditions found in China or Korea. So when you say that the winter solstice traditions are very similar to Christmas, make sure that you specify that you're really talking about French and Italian, Celtic, German, Norse. Those are the traditions that you're talking about, which is totally fine and very true. And we're going to discuss why there's a similarity there. So anyway, the Kalanish stones. They also, when the sun sets during the solstice, it sits right in the middle of two of the stones and then hits the center stone. And there is a small hole in the center stone that the sun directly shines through while it's setting during the winter solstice.
That's so awesome.
It is. It's so awesome. It is so awesome, especially because it was made thousands of years ago. So it's just so cool. So cool.
They know
But-
what they are doing then too.
That they did. That they did.
Alex,
So
Alex,
yes.
just I know we're concentrating on Celtic at the moment, but just as a matter of reference, also in Ireland, at the Newgrange Passage, I don't know whether you've heard about this.
Yes.
Okay. So during the winter solstice, the sun aligns to a very similar type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from it's a whole passageway that goes into a big chamber that's buried under a mound of dirt, basically. But what happens is at the moment of sunset, the light is perfectly aligned with the whole passage. And what it does is, as the sun actually breaks onto the very tip of the sun, the very bottom of the sun hits the horizon, the inner chamber starts to illuminate. And when it's halfway done, that whole inner chamber is completely illuminated. I've been there, I've been inside that very chamber during it happening, and it is the most spine-tingling experience you could ever have as a human being.
Wow. Oh, I've wanted to go there so bad. That's so cool that you've been. That's awesome.
Yeah, I actually had it's an English heritage site, just like Stonehenge. And through connections I have back in the UK, when I was living back in the UK, I've been to the summer and winter solstice at Stonehenge, actually the other side of the barrier to where I'm within 3 foot of the actual henge. Taking part in the Druid ceremony there.
Oh, that is amazing. I've always wanted to do that. That is so cool. I've been virtually since they started doing it virtually, but it's just not the same.
No.
No, and I'm fortunate in that English heritage will allow the rules to be broken because technically it's against the law to touch the stones of the henge.
Mm-hmm.
You are literally breaking like 12 different laws by putting your hand upon the henge. And I've actually got to touch the stones at Stonehenge.
Wow. Oh, that's so cool. I'm so jealous. Oh, that's awesome.
But sorry, I diversify. Sorry.
No, that is so cool. No, you're not. This is what this is for. Right after I'm done with my stories, I'm going to open it up to you guys telling stories. So, like, that's great. I'm so happy that you're already doing that. Thank you. Okay. So yeah, so we just finished talking about where the sun aligns on the Kalanish stones. And this, as well as many other things, because once again, the Celtic people were better at writing things down than the Norse people, much better, but still didn't write everything down that they did. And also, unlike the Middle East, where everything was very much an open practice, in Celtic tradition, as well as many traditions throughout the UK, a lot of things are much more secretive and just for the Druids or just for whatever group that you are a part of in Celtic tradition. And so not a lot of things were open to the public and still aren't today. Which is much different than the Middle East, where most things were completely open to the public and even seen as not very serious. And magic was just kind of more a part of the culture for everybody rather than it being more secretive, which is I think both are super cool. I love the secretism of the Druids. I find it to be extremely fascinating. But anyway, so one of the things that we do know about these traditions and ceremonies surrounding the Kalanish stones is that one of the rituals and ceremonies was symbolizing death and rebirth. So we have the death of, kind of the way that I guess a good way to explain it would kind of be the death of the old year and the birth of a new year. But it's a lot more deep than that. That's kind of just scratching the surface of the death and rebirth that is involved in the winter solstice. Because it's also, when I say a symbol of birth, one of the ways that they compare Celtic tradition to more Christian traditions that came up much later, but one of the ways that they compare it is the literal birth of the sun. And during Christmas, what are they celebrating? The birth of the sun. But theirs is the birth of the Son of God.
Jesus was born in April.
Yeah, exactly. But we don't talk about that. But yeah, Jesus was born in April. But Christmas. But yeah, so one of the similarities being the birth of the sun or the birth of the Son of God. But in this tradition, it is just the birth of the sun, but the literal birth. So a lot of Celtic authors and literature from that era will discuss and talk about the labor pains of the universe and literally the universe giving birth to the sun and celebrating that birthing ceremony of the sun returning. Because from the darkest night of the year, because as we know, during the winter solstice, it literally is scientifically, the sun will set the earliest and rise the latest. It is the longest night of the year. It's really the longest nights of the year, but
Yeah, it's about 2 or 3 nights, something like that, that the time is exactly the same.
exactly. Yep.
We'll get into that when I talk about Lithuanian stuff.
Which is I can't wait. I'm so excited. But yes, so you have the birth of the sun, because after the longest night, that is the labor pains and the birthing process, and then the sun is reborn. And now you know that you have made it through. You have made it through the longest night. You have a lot of people, a big misconception that I have noticed within especially Wiccan communities when they try to have Celtic celebrations about the sun or about winter solstice, sorry, is that they forget that this is a sun celebration. that yes, we are celebrating the longest night of the year, which means we do discuss and talk about living in that space of darkness. But the celebration in Celtic tradition surrounds the birth of the sun much more. The fact that we made it through, the longest night is over, and the sun is beginning to come back. And a lot of the traditions and celebrations surround the sun coming back a lot more than sitting in the darkness. And I feel like a lot of New Age Wicca focuses a lot more on sitting in the darkness, which is fine. It's just very, very different traditions. One Celtic tradition focuses a lot more on the sun and its return after the darkness. So, yes, the Colonish stones and the placement of the sun during the solstice within the stones represents, one of the things that it represents is death and rebirth. And then, of course, the stories that are told during this time are such a beautiful blend of the darkness and going through the darkness and helping each other through the darkness. And when we talk about the darkness, it's not just metaphorical. Like in 2024, it tends to be a little bit more metaphorical because, well, a good chunk of us are no longer dying because it's cold. Now, there are people who are still dying because it's cold. And there are people who are still dying because there is no food. But that is less of us than it was thousands of years ago. And so when they discuss and talk about death as well, it is also remembering those who did not make it through the winter, remembering those that did not make it through the cold, remembering the children that didn't make it, and the people who didn't make it through the time of not being able to eat as much, not having as many crops to grow, and not having as much warmth. And that is where one of the traditions comes from, to give each other food, to give each other gifts. It is much less about giving each other gifts because it's the time of giving. And yes, it is, you have that aspect of it. But it's also, please don't die. Please have this food so that you make it through the winter. Please have this wine so you make it through the winter. Please have this blanket so that you make it through the winter. And that's a little bit of a different vibe than, oh, it's giving season and you want to spend time with family and to make each other feel happy and loved, which is true, but it comes and stems from a lot more of wanting to survive and helping each other survive. And that is also where we get into the idea during the winter solstice, which, as we know, we are celebrating this line between death and birth. And when you are celebrating this line and this veil between death and rebirth, the death of the old year, the death of the old harvest, the death of loved ones and friends and children and animals, and also the rebirth of the sun, the rebirth of the new year. A lot of Celtic traditions do say that this is the beginning of the new year. Some Celtic traditions have it at Samhain, so it varies, but some Celtic traditions, as well as Arabic traditions, have this as the beginning of the new year, because we have, the death of the old harvest and the rebirth of the sun. But also with that comes a veil. And the same veil that we talked about during Samhain and during Halloween, during Dia de los Muertos, the same veil that we talk about, where the veil is thin between the two worlds, happens during the winter solstice as well, because you are in this transitionary period between death and rebirth. And anytime you are in a transitionary period between death and rebirth, or pretty much any form of transitional period, you get the thinning of the veil. And especially during the winter solstice, as we talked about, where things are very cold and you lost a lot of people that you love. And so they also have a connection to, or they also have traditions where they celebrate their connection to the spirit world and portals to the spirit world. And the portals to the spirit world were symbolized and shown off by burial mounds. And a lot of the burial mounds that you find, there are many, obviously not anywhere right next to the Kalanish stones, but through the path that you walk and through the rolling hills that exist over by the Kalanish stones, you will also see burial mounds. And so these often align with the winter solstice, and they were typically, if somebody did die during the winter, one of the traditions was to bury them at the solstice and to celebrate their life and to have their funeral during the solstice, because they could come and see you and talk to you one last time because of the thinning of the veil between our two worlds. So there's another word that I'm going to put into the chat, because once again, but so these burial mounds, SHOW. I pronounce it Meisho, Meishoe, but Meishoe, Meishoe. I'm not. Anyway.
Mei Shui.
Meishoe.
Meishoe.
Thank you. Cool. I was right the first time. Awesome. Good to know. So these burial mounds, such as Meishoe, showcase how the Celtic people linked the rebirth of the sun with the concepts of the afterlife and the astral plane. The Celtic people who inherited burial mounds, such as Meishoe, as part of their cultural landscape, used to interpret this phenomenon as a sign of the sun reviving the spirits within, linking the rebirth of the sun with concepts of the afterlife. So basically, these burial mounds, a lot of times, not only would they create them themselves, and a lot of them are man-made, but a lot of these mounds just appear all around Ireland, and there's a lot of different folklore attached to them. And it depends on where you are and which parts of Ireland that you're in, that you see the different traditions and culture that surround them. There are some mounds that exist near the shore of the beach, and throughout different beaches all throughout Ireland. And those ones a lot of times are connected to the Fae and to the Celtic Fae. There are also burial mounds that exist near a lot of these standing rock areas, which there are actually quite a few of them. The ones that we talk about are just the really famous ones, but there are quite a few just areas that look like ritual spaces throughout Ireland. And a lot of them have these mounds that just exist naturally. And in Ireland, a lot of times they'll choose not to build anything on these and not to destroy them and not to take them down. And there's a lot of reasons for that, whether that being those are burial mounds, those are mounds of the dead, those are mounds that connect us to the other world, those are portals to the spirit world, or also those are homes to the Fae. There's many different ones. Those are the major ones, but yes. And so Meishoe is one of those, and it is a mound, or a grouping of mounds that is not touched, and that is sacred during the winter solstice, to help remember the dead, to speak to the dead, to enter a portal to take you to the realm in which you can have a conversation with those who you love who have passed on during the winter solstice. And also a portal so that you can talk and communicate with those who have passed on during the time of the thinning veil during the winter solstice. And so those are some of the Celtic traditions surrounding the winter solstice that I find to be very interesting. There are so many more, but those are the two that I wanted to talk about. And before I go on to my other stories about Arabic traditions surrounding the winter solstice, I was wondering if any of you had any stories that you would like to share about cultures or traditions that you find to be really cool, or even ones that you yourself celebrate during the winter solstice.
I can start my spiel that's not 100% done on Lithuania and culture, or we could hear from others. I don't have a preference.
I want to hear your story, Robin, but I also want to hear everybody else.
I personally celebrate the Yule and winter solstice as well as Christmas. That's just something that I've developed over, I guess, last 20 years or so.
I like that because like it's a little bit more accepted in American culture to celebrate Christmas. Like my roommates are all Buddhist and they still celebrate Christmas. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I think that makes sense personally.
Yeah, I just find that it's interesting that there's like a crossover in traditions between the two. Like, Christmas time we have the tree up, and that's a Yule tree. Um, we'll have the Yule log and have it as a dessert. So it's interesting that see that there's similarities there, but they're just different timings and differences between them too as well.
I do the Yule log and I burn the one from the previous year. I celebrate the Yule.
That's awesome. Thank you both so much for sharing what you guys do for Yule. That's awesome.
We have, well, okay. So Yule, for us, we always do the traditional Yule log. We go out, we bless a tree, we find a fallen branch that's big enough for us to set on a table in the house. And we take an axe that has runes in it, and we use that to cut it to length. So we always take more than we need. But what we do with the offcut, we always burn the offcut. So we have the light inside the house, but we also have the light outside. And then, me being the alchemist that I am, I pinch all the ashes and I pinch all the charcoal that's made from it, and I use that within my practice throughout the year as it's one of the bases of my carbon that I use will be taken from the offcuts of the Yule log that we did over the solstice period. So that's how I kind of tie it into stuff we do here. As I say, we prepare a log, it's cut with an axe. Well, it's not an axe, it's more like a homemade hatchet.
It works.
Yeah, exactly. It works. But we also are mindful of other people, and it is a time. To me, the solstice and Yule represents past, present, and future. It represents those that are with us, those that are no longer with us. And as somebody who is a pagan, I'm also mindful of other people and other religions. And if you come into our house and you know what to look for, you can tell this is a pagan house. But we still have the traditional things like the angel on top of the tree. We try to incorporate as much as we can of traditions from my heritage as well as other people's heritage. My wife has German lineage. I have Romanian lineage. We take into account Mel's left pinky fingernail that is Italian, and we try to bring a little bit of Italian into it. We, for instance, our Christmas dinner is actually a lasagna.
That's awesome.
We have lasagna, but the thing is, the pan it's cooked in is actually from 1937.
Wow.
Wow.
And it was Mel's grandmother's, passed down to her mother, passed down to Mel, and when Mel passes, it will also get passed down to her daughter. So
Wow.
we incorporate bits of as much as we can from different traditions. Look, Alex, close your ears, you're not going to like this. We use, for instance, any fat or tallow that we get from cooking meats over the Christmas period.
That's fine. I thought you were going to talk about God.
No.
That's fine.
But we actually use that when we make our nut and seed bars that we hang outside.
Oh, that's so cool.
So again, we're giving from us to nature. It's biodegradable, it's safe for animals, it gives them energy, as well as doing the nuts, the seeds, and so on and so forth, all that kind of stuff. But we try to incorporate as much of nature versus humanity, light versus dark, because at the end of the day, the tallow comes from something that's given its life. We've consumed it, but by the same token, we're giving a little bit of that back to Mother Nature in the fact that we use the tallow and the fact that we render in making something that's healthy, not only for the ground, it's not going to hurt the ground, it's not going to hurt any area where we hang it. And like you say, we actually use hemp string to tie them.
Yeah.
If you go out into my garden, the tree that's at the corner, you'll see there is hemp loops from last year that still haven't fully biodegraded, but they're in the process of being picked up by the birds and so on and so forth. So we try to incorporate as much of our family heritage, our traditions, some that are very specific that, for instance, only I will do because of my Romanian roots, and my heritage and semi-closed, not closed. I'll just say Romany. Let's just call it what it is. But we try to be respectful to nature, to ourselves. My saying is to ourselves, to nature, to light, to dark, to those that are present and those that have gone. Those are my 5 rules for solstice and Yule.
Can you repeat those again, Paul? The 5?
Sorry?
Can you repeat those again, the 5?
Yep. To self, to nature. Self, nature, those that are with, those that are no longer with us, and to the heritage.
Okay.
Say again?
Nothing. There was a video that started playing on my phone.
Okay. So
Oh
before, because I really want to hear Robin's story too.
my
So, but before Robin goes ahead, I also wanted to go back because I said that I would and I didn't. So really, really quickly for 2 seconds. So, I'm sure a lot of you have already heard this. It's been in many YouTube videos throughout time. But one of the reasons, because it would take me 17 hours to tell you all of the reasons and everything that happened. But one of the reasons why European traditions surrounding the winter solstice from thousands and thousands of years ago that predate Christianity and Catholicism, why are they so similar to the way that Christians celebrate Christmas? And it's really because, okay, part of me, because we live in 2024, I don't want to, I don't know. I don't always want to be that guy that's like, oh, things that other people think are really cool and beautiful, by the way, is actually genocide. And I feel like I do that a lot. So because we live in 2024 and this happened so long ago, technically nowadays in 2024, it is really, really cool and awesome that so many of the traditions share so much of their culture and their history and their traditions. It is really cool. And it is really beautiful that we can all come together in the traditions that we have for throughout so many different cultures, throughout so many different religions. And it is really cool that we share so many traditions throughout all of those religions. It is. But a very long time ago, a very, very, very long time ago, in Europe, when during the beginning of Christianity and the spread of Christianity, obviously, for a lot of you who are pagan, you are aware of the fact that many Christians don't think very highly of pagans. And they haven't since the dawning of Christianity.
I can rebut that
You
because
what?
I'm in a Catholic nursing home and I go to mass and my tradition is being Anglican and I am accepted throughout my time I'm here.
Oh, good. That makes me so happy. I am
Yeah.
so glad. That's wonderful. And
Yeah.
I think too, because you live in Canada, right?
Yeah.
I think that sometimes when I talk about the treatment of pagans by a lot of Christians, number one, obviously, I'm not talking about all Christians and Catholics or all pagans, but also I have a very American perspective. And I have not, I mean, I've traveled all over the world, but I have not told anybody all over the world that I'm pagan. So I'm coming from a very American / Colorado, where the state that I live in, and the way that pagans are treated in Colorado. And so a lot of times when I will tell people that I'm pagan, it's not met very nicely. It's either met with, why do you worship Satan?
I can understand that that's what's happening down there, sort of thing, but we don't get that really up here. Everybody's
Which is
accepting
good.
of everybody.
See, that's wonderful. And that's awesome. And honestly, that's something I would expect of Canada. So that's beautiful. That's wonderful. Because Canada, from what I hear, is such a nice, respectful, welcoming place where people are much nicer than they are in the United States. Obviously, that's stereotypical and I'm generalizing, but from the stories I've heard, they seem to be very nice in Canada.
Uh, we're very accepting to all different cultures and people, and basically, like where I was born in Toronto, it's changed so drastically. There's so many multicultural people, like unbelievable, living in Toronto, and everybody's accepting and live with each other just fine.
See, that's wonderful. That's good.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the problem comes from environmental factors, excluding the historical and factual stuff. I think a lot of it is environmental, especially like for me, for instance, I'm in the south.
I know.
And it's hot.
I
And
I
I'm in the
can walk.
north and it's cold.
I can walk from my house in any direction, and within a mile, I've gone past 5 churches.
Yeah, that sounds like the South.
And again, I'm very selective. I won't hide that I'm pagan. I don't hide, as I say, if you know what to look for, and as we say, you know, the old tradition of passing somebody an acorn as a sign that you're a witch.
I've never heard of that. But I've just read in my 365 good luck book that passing an acorn is passing good luck.
Yeah, it's passing good luck, but back in especially sort of the early sort of pre-witch trial and during the witch trial era, the passing of an acorn, if you slipped an acorn into somebody's hand and they accepted it, and it was kind of like the old nod and a wink type thing to let each other know that you were within safe people. You know, it's a way of passing luck and prosperity and all of that, but it was also a way, especially in England, because acorns are so prevalent. It was a way in England that a lot of what people would class as the witch community, in air quotes, would do to let each other know. Like if you were walking through the woods and you were foraging and somebody else was foraging, if somebody were to pass you an acorn, yes, they may just be giving you a fruit, a nut, but it was a way for people to acknowledge each other's belief system, you know, without being overt about, hey, I'm a herbalist. What about you? You know,
That's interesting.
the passing of an acorn, and again, I'm just purely talking, I don't know what it's like in America, whether that was a thing in America, if you look at it historically, but historically in the UK, and when I say the UK, I'm actually including Ireland as a whole because it wasn't
Oh,
divided. It wasn't divided back then. Yeah, don't even get me going, Alex. England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. The passing of an acorn was a way for people within the community to acknowledge each other, and whereas you have the witches' bells or the witches' keys that you could hang on doors, a lot of the time you would see wreaths that had acorns in them. If you saw holly and acorns together, it was a sign that somebody, I'm not going to say it was a pagan, because I don't believe back then they considered it to be paganism. I think they considered it to be their own way of life. You know, it was something, it was a tradition that was passed down through the family. You know, prime example, Italian Strega. You know, it's passed down through the family. It's not something that's openly discussed. It's just passed down in the family, and you know, it's grandma magic for the Appalachians. You know, it's
Mhm.
you can tie it into so many different things, but like one of the ways, and again, it's relevant to Yule at this time of year because what do squirrels eat this time of year? You know, so again, we're bringing nature into it, but the passing of an acorn was an old-fashioned way of letting somebody know that you were able to be visited if you need a cure for something.
It was sort of like a sacred
Yeah, like a secret.
motto or something like that.
You know, the Freemasons have their handshakes. Back in the day, we had acorns.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm like you, Paul, is that I'm selective as who I say what I am. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's none of their business. But if I feel comfortable with them, then I will mention it, and you know, they can ask questions of me if they want to.
As I say, I think a lot of it is environmental, in where you are and who you're talking to.
Mhm.
I have friends that are Christian. I have friends that are, you know, you name an Abrahamic religion, I've got friends in it. You name a pagan belief system, I've probably got somebody in that group too. Have I lost friends? Yes, absolutely, I have. But not just Christian friends. I've lost Islamic friends. I've lost um, Jewish friends. I've lost Buddhist friends. I've lost Taoist friends. You know, it's about tolerance, I think, to an extent. But by being tolerant, we mustn't also forget the history. And I think that's really important that we do bring. And I understand why Alex is getting nervous about being that person that always mentions genocide. But let's be honest, it's a fact.
It is.
It's not speculation, it is fact. And to shy away from it is to, I don't want to use harsh language, but it's the only way I can do it, is to be disrespectful to our ancestors. Some of them paid with their lives for what we believe in now. And it wasn't done on a one person in a village. It was done on a mass scale. And that has to be acknowledged. And that's, in today's society, that's a really hard conversation to get round because, you know, the society is all inclusive, all, you know, we don't exclude anybody. I understand that. But I also understand history is that. It is fact. It is recorded. It is noted. And to shy away from that because you might risk offending somebody or somebody getting offended, I think in itself is an offense. If I'm expressing words, you have a right to be offended. You have a right to disagree. Does it change my belief system? Does it? No. Is it going to stop me from saying the controversial thing? No. But I will try to be diplomatic about it. You know, Abrahamic religions are, you know, and Alex, you can talk about this maybe from the Islamic perspective because your roots come from Persia, so on and so forth. I'm not versed in that history, but what kind of persecution happened in the Islamic realm to people that didn't follow Islam?
It would be similar, wouldn't it be like
I'm
how it is today?
sorry. You see, this is what I'm on about me putting my foot in my mouth.
It's okay. It's okay.
But you know, what I'm saying is no matter where you are in the world, whatever you practice in the world, whichever religion, belief system, faith system it is, there's always going to be people persecuting you. I'm sorry, Buttercup, it's just the way it is. Can we change that? Maybe, but I honestly don't think we can. I think it will always exist. And here's why. Generation. Prime example. Somebody does not grow, somebody is not born a racist. They are taught to be racist.
And they accept to be racist as well.
Correct. Whereas, I'm trying to be a new person this year. Bear with me, folks. I'm trying to be more tolerant of other people. It's a work in progress. I can't hate on Christians because of their belief. Because I see a lot of my belief and my faith system in their religion. I can say the same about Judaism. I can say the same about Islam. Where do we want to take it, people? Too many people nowadays get upset at the fact that it's their religion, and if it's not their religion, then you're wrong. Okay, I would say look at the difference between a Catholic, a Mormon, and a Seventh-day Adventist, and
Baptist.
right, and Baptist, Mormon, Catholic. What branch of Christianity are you in? I can look at the Christian religion and I can go, well, according to the Mormons, the Catholics are the equivalent of the Antichrist. I can go to a Baptist, and if you're not Baptist, then you're going to burn. You can go to Pentecostal, and probably one of the more tolerant ones. You can go to Catholicism, and you can take the extremes there. But for instance, you look at things like hoodoo, voodoo,
Santeria.
Santeria, Pablo Mayombe. What's the one that starts with a G, Alex, that I can never pronounce? Pablo Mayombe, Santeria. For instance, if you look at Santeria, hoodoo, voodoo, Pablo Mayombe, they all heavily rely on Catholic saints, as does I'm going to offend somebody else here. I need Alex. Alex, help me out. Help me. I'm gonna say it wrong, and I know I am, and I don't care. But the Aztec, Mexican, and Spanish. You know what I'm talking about.
No, that's a good way of saying it. Yes.
But they all rely heavily. I mean, Santa Muerte. Hello.
And that was kind of like what I was getting to with why, though, because yes, what you said is completely true. And it is beautiful that all those religions are kind of like melded together and the traditions are together. And as of 2024, that's very, very beautiful. But the reason that voodoo and hoodoo end up sounding Catholic is slavery.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The amalgamation is important, but also the history and the heritage and the roots of it are important too. And the problem is people get too scared to talk about it because they don't want to offend somebody, some group, or whatever. You can't talk about religion without talking about persecution. You can't talk about a belief system without talking about persecution. The two go hand in hand.
Yep.
So, I think conversation is an important thing, but unfortunately, I don't think it's a conversation that can be had in 2024 because you'll get cancelled, you'll get called this, that, the other, and you'll get labelled.
I'm surprised I haven't been cancelled.
It's going to take pioneers that, again, I'm using a term, forgive me, that have got a big set of balls on them that can stand up and just say, look, I am pagan. I was persecuted by the Christian church. my ancestors were killed by the Christian church. And the Christian church has to turn around and say, we acknowledge that.
They have.
I
John Paul II
completely understand that
has.
I completely understand that they have. However, like Alex has said, and like I've experienced, I mean, we moved from our previous house because one year I put the Green King up on my door.
The Green King. What is that?
It
Green Man?
represents, yeah, the Green Man.
Okay, okay.
I put the Green Man up, and then in our neighborhood, we were targeted. And I'm on about to the point of vandalizing our house with spray paint to the point of Satan worshippers, devil worshippers, and everything else.
Oh my gosh, I'm called the devil. Well, not anymore.
What?
My Lady Hell necklace got noticed at when I was working in Utah, Iowa. God, I've been in too many states. And somebody asked about it, so I explained who it was, and she legitimately thought I was a devil worshiper. I'm like, she's okay.
But that's because they don't understand or they don't
Right,
know.
that's why it's important to have the conversations. But the problem is, when you start to have the conversation, everybody gets defensive. Rather than having an open, honest, general discussion, everybody gets really defensive, offensive, and takes offense. So my pledge to everybody in the Divination Academy is this. Next year, I'm just saying what I feel. And I'm sorry if I upset people, but that's just the way it's going to be with me moving forward. I will acknowledge both the past and the present, and where I think we should go in the future. Is this where I hand in my resignation, Alex?
Oh, shut up. You're never leaving.
He's tried.
Shut up right now.
This is an open forum.
You better not leave. I need you. You have to stay. I've just decided.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Good.
Most people don't want to listen to anything. They don't care. They really just don't care.
It's like you say, it's the my way or the highway version.
Yep,
Pagans,
exactly. When it comes to
I'm
I
sorry
had
to
a
say
snack
this.
not too long ago.
I'm sorry to say this, but pagans are just as guilty of it as Christians are. If you want to, if you want to take the Christian, if you want to focus specifically on the Catholic Church or the Christian Church, I'm just going to say Abrahamic religions are just as guilty as what pagans are.
I would say in
Everybody
in
is.
2024. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. Agreed.
And I think that needs to stop. I seriously think we need to understand that the only way things are going to move forward is if you have that open, uncomfortable, oh, my walls are going up. I don't want to listen to this. Perhaps you need to listen to this. Perhaps you do need to sit on the sidelines and listen to both sides of the argument. And then make your own opinion. But just remember, it's an opinion, it's not the law.
It's human
Our,
nature.
our ancestors couldn't say that because in a lot of cases, it was the law.
Yeah. And it's still the law in a lot of Arab countries too, with the not wearing the hijab. Or, I mean, it's all the time. But we have to make the change on it.
2025, baby.
Yes.
I think you guys down the States have got a lot of work to do. And I'm sorry because of who's in there now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the whole nother discussion.
That's a whole different discussion. It's so true. So true.
Well,
So true.
you'll tree decorating number 2.
Right? I know. My classes always turn into this. This is what Alex's classes are. I love it though. It's truly beautiful. I love my classes. So I think Paul pretty much covered what I was going to say. And I think that everybody here in this room, I probably don't need to necessarily go over the genocide, because I'm pretty sure most people in this room know exactly what I am talking about already. But just to kind of sum it up, I think that what Paul and what Robin, what everybody here has said has been beautiful. And thank you so much. I love these conversations. But yes, the reason that Christmas is similar to the way that a lot of European countries celebrate winter solstice is due to the fact that, for instance, and for example, the tree, the tradition throughout many European countries for winter solstice, like I said, was to go outside and to worship the evergreen tree, because it reminded them that the sun would return, that the crops were not permanently dead, that the earth was not permanently dormant, that the sun would return, and the evergreen tree stays green all year to remind you that the sun will return. Now, chopping it down and putting it in your house kind of defeats that a little bit, but sure, whatever. And then decorating the tree in things like birdseed and flowers and things that the animals could eat to remind the animals that the sun is going to return, that they are going to make it, and to help them make it through the winter, is why they decorated those trees with food for the animals as well as food for each other, but also the light that was used to decorate the tree, which of course thousands of years ago was not lights that plug into a socket and that you wrap around the tree, but a lot of times it was different forms of light, whether that be candles or incense or just herbs lit on fire, to celebrate the light and the return of the sun, and to light people's pathway through the winter. And obviously, as we all know, I'm sure, during the height of the colonization of Europe through Christianity, the Christian and Catholic colonization of Europe, that practicing things like that was considered witchcraft and evil, and it was outlawed. And if you did do it, you would be killed. So many people were still doing it because the pagans were not, throughout history, known to be the type of people that would just sit down and shut up and convert to a different religion. So they were still doing it, and they found it easier than just murdering every single person who existed in the entire village. Instead of that, they just made the tree part of the Christian Christmas to erase the pagan celebration, to erase their holiday, to erase their traditions, and to say, well, if they're outside decorating a tree, obviously they're worshiping Jesus and Jesus's birthday. So they found it easier to erase their culture, to erase their religion, to erase their spirituality. And so they added a lot of these traditions to Christmas in order to erase other people's culture. And it worked. And today, when you ask people where the celebration of the evergreen tree comes from, a lot of the generalized public think that it is Christian and a symbol of Christmas. So even though it didn't fully work, because all 7 of us are here right now, so obviously their plan failed, but it did a very good job during its time. And so remembering what happened throughout history and giving those people who died to be able, so that we could continue practicing this, giving them respect, honesty, and thanks for what they did.
Is there a memorial or a day of remembrance of the witch trials at all?
Salem, Massachusetts does have a Memorial Day that they do for specifically Salem. But as we know, witch trials happened all over the world, not just Salem, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And I am unsure about the memorial days for other places or if they have them. I'm sure the UK probably does. I could see that being something that exists in England. I'm not sure. And Ireland, I could see that being a thing that exists in Ireland, because the Druids still exist there. And
I believe, and again, I've not. I came to the US in 2006, but the acknowledgement of the genocide by the government that happened over the witch trials. I believe some pagan communities in the UK use that specific date as a form of celebration. I would have to double check with friends back in the UK. But I could certainly see that.
I could see that too in the UK. And then I know in Colorado we have Pagan Pride, which
right, we have that here too.
Yeah,
where I am.
And I know they discuss this during Pagan Pride because I have been one of the speakers at Pagan Pride 5 or 6 years in a row where I'm the one who talks about this. So I know they talk about this because I'm that person.
Hi.
But we don't do like a memorial thing for it or anything. They just have people do workshops that teach about it. So
yeah, it's something anyway. So that's good to hear.
Yeah. Yep. So there's that. Now I want to let's do Robin's story and then let's get into our ritual that we're going to do and head outside. So yes, but go ahead, Robin, because I'm actually really interested because I don't know a lot about this culture. So please tell us.
So it's interesting that my brain just completely went to zero. That's great. Excellent. So of course the winter solstice is celebrating the sun, the shortest day of the year, and then it turning into the longest. Well, turning back into spring and rebirth and all that great stuff. So I'm going to pronounce some of these words wrong, and I will not. I don't have a Latvian keyboard, so I can't put the fancy dots and other accents above it. But I will do my best. So on December 21st, which is the celebration day for Yule, a white 9-horned deer runs away in Latvia, and it will return on Christmas, bringing back the sun on its horns. The type of deer is said to be a red deer. So like the fun thing, red deer's antlers grow straight up, and that way it can nestle the sun in its horns. It's said that birds and blacksmiths will sit in its horns. The birds will sing, carols of some kind, while the blacksmiths make non-ferrous metals. Around the Baltics, Lithuanians call it Kaldeos, which kind of sounds like a Pokemon region to me. But it is that there is a dot above the E, a singular dot. Latvians call it Yule, and of course Lithuanians call it Zimsed. Not spelled how you think. It is spelled Ziemessbetki. And then a lot of my research turned into Lithuanian lore. Somehow, this website really loved Lithuania that I found. Zemanya, who is basically the Baltic king god, also god of the earth, likes to play dress up. He'll come down to earth, dressed as an old man and be a beggar and basically bless you if you help him. Specifically during Caldeos, he likes to walk around, ask for a hot meal and a place to stay the night. I, just basically seeing who has a good soul and who's gonna be blessed by me. Some suggest Caldeos comes from the word kalti, which means to forge. I accidentally deleted the translation because I am a goober. The Lithuanians like to say Calvenius Sovo Lamis Calvis, which I will get the translation back up because, again, I am silly and deleted it. It translates to everyone has their own lucky blacksmith. Because, again, the blacksmith would be riding in the deer's antlers, which I have a picture of right here. The blacksmith would make, funny enough, golden rings to celebrate perfection and continuity, and silver scissors to help trim down spruce and pine tops, which is where the god's palace would be. And then they have their own Yule log, which I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, but it's Bluckus, Blukis, which basically you are to drag a yes, I think we've talked about that before in one of your classes, Alex. There's a log or a stump that you would basically drag around the festival, which is held on Christmas Eve, and it's called Kusios, Kucios, and it has a whole bunch of fancy letters in it. And what you would do during the day is you could jump over it, beat it, scream at it, and at the end of the night, you burn it. But it is basically just a log or whatever that you would sit on. And the reason that you would do this at the end of the year was to release all the tension and built up anger you had. People would dress up, dance, sing, and even prank each other during it. And here is an image of somebody dressed up sitting on their bulkus, which I love, and I may want to go to Lithuania and meet these people. As far as I know, it is not a closed practice. But bulkus is...
You are correct. You are correct. It is not closed.
Kusios is fun because they make between 9 to 12 dishes depending on your family, as a big welcoming feast to Christmas, which again they call it Caldeos. But I am super enthralled in Lithuanian lore right now, so much to the fact that I went and listened to Supernova 2025, which is it's actually 2024, but it's their yearly songs contest they have every year. And they did a song this year called LIGO, which is the name of the summer festival they have celebrating the summer solstice, which that's a whole nother next solstice celebration we do discussion. Because I could talk about LIGO as well. But that is the information that I have off the top of my head, because I am way too much into Lithuanian lore, and it makes me want to get a passport and visit Lithuania.
That was so cool. Thank you for sharing that. That is awesome. I knew nothing about that. So that is super cool. And that also sounds like such a fun ritual. And I feel like that would be something we could do like on the divination land because there are so many gigantic, huge stumps, and we could do a big ritual surrounding the stump, and then we could look up and do a whole bunch of research about this. And I think that sounds like something really fun. I love that. So I think that's so cool. Thank you so much, Robin.
Hire Joxy Whipper to come out there and whip our trees for us.
Yeah. You'll have to come down though. You have to visit Colorado so that you can run the ritual.
Yes, I would. Well, I mean, I live in Michigan now, which I live, if you ever looked at Michigan, it's a mitten. I live over here close to the lakes, and one of our students, River, lives here in the Thumb. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah.
Sweet. Oh, that's awesome.
So I would have to go and I'd have to go drag him and be like, you're going to Colorado.
Yes. Next year, retreat. I want to try and have quite a few next year. I know I said that last year, but this year I want to try and have quite a few retreats so we can have a lot of students come out. And yeah, anyway. So
Alex, before you carry on, can I just add a little bit more context and maybe offer Robin some more points of research?
Yes, please.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so you mentioned the Sacred Supper, which happens, where they have the traditional 12 dishes.
Yes.
That happens on, now that it's, I'm going to mess up the spellings. Kuklo?
Kusios here. Hang on.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm on a Baltic pagan website looking at it. That's the only reason I had it so readily able to copy and paste.
Right. Now, again, this is kind of going to tie in to a conversation we were having. Do you know why it's traditionally 12 dishes?
I'm assuming it's the same as, I'm forgetting the tradition. It's not Judaism. It's oh my gosh, I just watched this on Sesame Street today with my nephews. But they eat 12 grapes to bring good luck to the 12 months. 1 month, one for each month.
Right. But it also has roots in Christianity. This is at the point of crossover between paganism and Christianity. The number 12 is significant in the 12 apostles. So that's
Lithuania also, these 12 dishes, you're supposed to abstain from meat. So
yeah, meat and dairy free. Now I know this because I have a friend who is Lithuanian. Poppy seed milk. You need to look up a recipe of poppy seed milk.
Already on it. You can't tell my autistic ass you can't say poppy seed milk and have me not look this up.
And also, and again, this ties into the conversation that we're having. It's cranberry kistel. I think it's K-I. It's either Kissel or Kisel.
Double S.
Right. It's like, it is absolutely divine. It's like a soup, but it's dessert.
Yeah, specifically make sure you look up the right one because it looks like the Kiesel's origin is Ukraine, Russia, Poland, Finland, and Belarus.
Oh, okay.
So, at least that's what, if we are to believe Wikipedia.
No. I mean, hey, I'm just talking about what I've had from a friend of mine who is Lithuanian and pagan, and we've had various discussions, which is why I say if you need resources, I have a humanoid resource that's like, yes. Also, one of the things they traditionally do when they sit down for the meal, they will put clumps of hay underneath the tablecloth.
That the children
I
rip out at the end of the night.
do. You already know.
I am I do not know what part of my autistic brain was like, you know what you need to be obsessed with recently? Lithuanian culture. And I was like, you're right, brain.
And also, traditionally, when you sit around for a family meal, now this is not just Lithuania, this is also Romanian. There is always a place set at the table that is empty. That is to honor the ancestors that are not there to eat the meal with you.
That makes sense.
It's
Where do I
done
get
as a
seeds
and also big one, wax and water, the divination is typically done around this time of year. I can't remember exactly what the terminology is. Absolutely zero work, but wax stripping where they melt wax and it's poured into cold water. As a lot of pagans do, you then interpret the shapes. It's a form of divination. I can't remember exactly the correct terminology for it. Alex will probably pop in now. But wax in water was a traditional thing, not just in Latvia, but all around that Baltic area. So some little tidbits for you.
Well, I just found a recipe for Lithuanian poppy seed milk, so that's in the chat.
Sorry, Alex.
I saw. There we go. I only know I don't know what it would be called in Lithuania. Which, like I said, I don't know much about Lithuania, which is so cool that I'm getting to learn now. This is awesome. I love it when I get to learn.
Baltic mythology is fun.
It super is. But I just know it as wax reading. And I should I do it too. I've been learning it since I started learning tarot. Wax reading is something that I do all the time. And then I use different forms of earth, air, fire, or water to be able to read it. So specifically only using water, I am not sure of the direct what it would be called if you're specifically and only using water, especially in a Lithuanian tradition. So I would have to look that up. But wax reading is really common in the Middle East. And usually you use earth, air, fire, and water to read the wax. But part of it is pouring the wax into water. And it's really popular all over the world. It's something that they do everywhere.
One last thing. I know I keep on saying this. Robin, do you know anything about shoe throwing?
Shoe throwing, it's a sport. I know in somewhere in Europe, it's like a sport that turned into a sport because of tradition. I don't remember how though.
Okay, so tradition again, it's one of these traditions that yes, it's done in Lithuania, but it's also done around that region as a whole. But shoe throwing, if an unmarried girl had a fancier, she had a crush on somebody, what they could do on Christmas Day in the evening was they could go face away from the house and throw a shoe over their shoulder. If the shoe landed with the toe pointing towards the front door, it was a good omen. If it was pointing away, it was a bad omen.
That is so cool. I
Yep.
didn't even know that. That is so awesome.
that rolls into another Lithuanian tradition. No. Is it Lithuanian? I
As
believe
I
it
say,
is.
I know for a fact I know for a fact that's also observed in Ukraine, Russia, I believe Finland. I know it's done also in Iceland, and I know for a fact it's done in Romania because it was actually when I did the research on it through Romania that I found that it was also other areas that do this. Different
It's
places have different times, but it was a way of finding out whether you were going to basically get married to the person you fancied, and it was specifically done by unwed females, not males.
so
I
in
didn't.
Russia,
So
in Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Poland, they would go look for the fern flower on Ivan Kupla Day. Young females would go into a forest with their prospective partner, wearing some sort of wreath in their head. And then the couple will look for the fern flower. They're really they're really having sex. In the woods. If the male comes out wearing the wreath, they are engaged to be wed.
I need to look more into just Eastern Europe in general. Slash, like, because I also, if you were to ask me about like Russian traditions, the only ones that I would know would be very specifically towards Asia and the practices throughout Northern Asia, but not so much
Okay.
Eastern Europe. So anyway, this is so cool. Continue.
You are well versed in Strega, correct?
Yes.
Okay, you will see a lot of similarities between Strega practice and Baltic practice. There is a lot of tie over.
That's so cool. Good. That's good to know because that'll make it easier to go research all of this.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, cool. Thank you so much, Robin and Paul. That was fascinating. And I love it when we talk about stuff that I know nothing about. So I get to hang out and learn new things, which is always so much fun. So now I know. I know. So many of my classes, I'm like, I promise we're gonna do a thing, but first we're just gonna like talk about lure for like 3 hours. Then we're gonna do a thing. I swear. So I have in front of me, and so for those of you who did bring things to decorate the tree outside, grab those things back. If you kind of push them aside so that you could hang out and talk with us, grab them again. I have my 3 different little bowls that I'm using for my 3 different types of things that I'm using to decorate the tree. The black oil sunflower seeds are also over there, but they're in a gigantic bag that's like 1,700 million pounds. So I have to.
Okay, Pengy.
I have to grab those later. So first, what we're going to do is the word that I use is that we are going to enchant what we are using to decorate the tree. But there are many different words from many different traditions and cultures, especially surrounding winter solstice, that you can use instead of the word enchant. And whatever you use from your culture and your practice is wonderful. But I'm going to call it enchanting. So here's how we are going to enchant what we are using. We are going to do a very short and small ritual. And during this ritual, we are going to discuss and talk about the Oak King and the Holly King. And for those of you who don't know what the Oak King and the Holly King are, I grew up with this tradition. It is a very European tradition. A lot of the actually the Oak King and the Holly King, if you look it up on Google, I'm pretty sure they call it Celtic. But the Strega witches would argue with you that it's not Celtic. And I'm sure a lot of witches from Wales and England would also disagree that it's not Celtic, and probably Greek mythology would argue that it's not Celtic. But the Oak King and the Holly King are. I'm going to tell you a story. Let me bring up my notes.
Story time! Yay!
Yes, this one I promise will be very short. I'm not going to go on a 2-hour long rant again. um, okay, so the Oak King and the Holly King. Oh my gosh. Should have had this pulled up while Robin was talking. Okay. All right. Okay. So this, once again, I'm going to tell it from the best of my knowledge as a Celtic story and include Celtic folklore. But as I told you before, it is highly debated where the Oak King and the Holly King are from. But I'm using a story from Celtic folklore. So it was believed that the sun stood still for 12 days. So a log was lit to vanquish darkness and to help evil spirits find their way, to help all spirits, those who had good intentions and those who didn't, to find their way through our world and back to the spirit world after they were done visiting the loved ones that they visited during the winter solstice. The Yule log was used to light a path for not only those celebrating in the world of the living, but those celebrating in the world of the dead. It was the log that was lit was then the ashes and the charcoal that the log turned into was then sprinkled around both into food as well as into candles, as well as into people's hair and rubbed on people's skin in order to bring good luck. During the celebration, houses were decorated with holly, ivy, mistletoe, and other plants. Many of these plants were thought to hold special powers, but they were also used as a reminder of rebirth, a return to longer days, and a return to the planting and eating of crops. The world would become warm once again. Winter solstice celebrates the rebirth of the sun and the changing of the seasons. The changing of the seasons brings the legend of the Oak King and the Holly King. They are personifications of summer and winter. They are locked in a never-ending battle for seasonal supremacy. Both kings represented light, darkness, crop renewal, and growth during the warm days of summer. And when in full leaf, the Oak King is at the height of his strength. On the approach of winter and with the loss of the Oak King's leaves, the Holly King regains power, which peaks at the winter solstice. During both solstices, the summer and the winter solstice, these two kings have an epic battle to the death. And during the winter solstice, the Holly King and the Oak King fight. The Oak King wins and beats the Holly King during the end of the winter solstice. Because once the sun rises after the night of the winter solstice, the Holly King loses all of his powers. Well, not all of them, but he loses a lot of his powers and becomes much weaker. And the Oak King wins and is reborn. As his new leaves open, the cycle perpetuates. Both are portrayed in familiar ways, with the Holly King as a woodsy version of, basically, if you think of the Oak King, if you know who the Green Man is, the Oak King is covered in big, giant, beautiful leaves and looks like a big, full, vibrant oak tree. Whereas the Holly King is also filled with green leaves, but a lot of them tend to be holly leaves covered in red berries, or pine leaves and pine trees to represent the evergreen tree. And so, yes, and they all represent many different things. Whereas the Oak King represents fertility and the growth of crops and the sun and light and happiness and festivities and dancing and going outside and the harvest. The Holly King represents love and warmth, but through darkness, because during the darkness and during the cold, we all seek the warmth of each other. The Holly King represents introspection, meditation. The Holly King represents preservation and eating food and warm blankets and fire and everything that you would kind of, there's lots of different representations of this, by the way. I am definitely simplifying it and only telling you one version of the story. So I encourage you to go look up all the different mythology surrounding the Oak King and the Holly King. It's really fun. It's definitely just more of a fun story. I grew up with this when I was little, and on the winter solstice and the summer solstice, I used to go with my mom, and we would go to a fight where people would like dress up as the Oak King and the Holly King, and they would fight each other to the death during the ritual. And then, in the winter solstice, the Holly King would die, and during the summer solstice, the Oak King would die. And when one dies, the other one is reborn from their death the previous year, and the cycle continues. So that is a very simplified story of the Oak King and the Holly King. And so what we are going to do,
Alex,
yes,
real quickly, very, very quick interjection.
yes,
You were talking about how they took the ashes from the fire and they Ash Tuesday. What do they do? Just saying.
I know, it's awful. It's so awful, because like on one hand that's really cool, and on the other hand I know why that's a thing, and it's really sad.
I know. Sorry, I didn't mean to diversify the subject, but I'll just throw that out there.
No, thank you. That's so true. I didn't even think about that one. Thank you. So what we are going to do is you are going to stage and have your own battle in your mind or drawn on paper, whatever you would like, whatever helps you. If you are somebody who really enjoys meditation, then I would say do this as a meditation. If you're the type of person who, oh, where did Robin go? Oh, and Brandy had to leave too.
We had Robin drop out earlier due to other commitments, and then we've just had another one drop.
Well,
I
oh well.
suspect because I was rambling too much. I'm sorry.
Oh no, don't be sorry at all. This is great. I've loved tonight. It's been so much fun. And honestly, my classes normally start at 7, so this isn't like late. And it's a Saturday. It's totally fine. I'm having fun. And I'm sad that Brandy had to leave. That sucks, but that's okay. Anyway, so if you're somebody who really likes meditation, then do this as a meditation. If you are somebody who enjoys drawing, you can do this as more of a drawing. If you're somebody who likes writing, do this as a creative writing assignment instead, whatever you enjoy. So we are going to have our own battle between the Oak King and the Holly King. Knowing what the Oak King represents and knowing that what the Holly King represents. And the Holly King represents, as we talked about, whatever the cold and the dark months mean to you. And it being cold and dark, number one, does not have to correlate with sadness or depression or things being dead or dying or sad in any way. If it does for you, that's totally cool. Then write about that or meditate on that. If it doesn't, because so personally for me, I enjoy the cold much more. I dislike the heat and the sun and the things I'm expected to do outside. And I really like the cold and the winter and the snow where nobody expects me to leave my house. So the cold and the dark months don't always have to mean death and sadness and depression and being dormant. And it doesn't always have to mean that. It can mean whatever it means to you. So this is what we're going to meditate on or write about or draw about. Imagine what the Holly King means to you, meaning what do the dark, cold months mean to you? And that can be literal, metaphorical, magical. It can be metaphysical. It can be how you practice magic differently in the dark months versus the warm months, how you celebrate, what your traditions are, how your mental health is, whatever. It can be anything. But what do the cold and dark months mean to you? What does the Holly King mean to you? And what does the Oak King mean to you? The warm, hot months where it's light outside until 9 p.m. What do those months mean to you? And then have them fight and realize and understand that today, this week, the Holly King lost. And what does that mean to you? And what does it mean to you that the Holly King lost and that the Oak King won? And what kinds of things are going to be coming into your life now that the Oak King has won and the Holly King has died? And while you do that, while you're drawing or writing or meditating, have one hand or a part of your body touching the beautiful things that you are going to use to decorate the trees outside. And if you don't have any things, that's fine too. Just do the meditation or the drawing and the writing and stuff. And that is going to be our way, because enchanting to me is just taking energy from yourself, and I mean literal energy, like the actual heat that comes off of your body, and putting it into something else. And that can be metaphysical energy, it can be literal energy, it can be magical energy, it can be changing its form via alchemy, it can be doing anything. Enchantment is taking energy from somewhere else and putting it into something else. So go ahead. You may begin. If anybody has any questions about the meditation / the writing / the drawing, let me know. And if not, you can go ahead and begin. And as we take your time, finish up slowly, however you know, take your time. But if anybody would like to share, like Paul did, and share what you wrote or what you drew or what you were thinking about, or just share what the Holly King means to you and what the Oak King means to you, yeah, I would love to hear.
The reason I posted the image, Alex, is because this time of year, that epic battle between the Holly Kings and the Oak King is something that I use as a point of reflection. And it just happened to coincide with some work I actually did on Christmas Eve, which is when that image was done.
Oh, that's awesome. That is so cool. So this
But
is
yeah,
something that you use as part of your practice, is the Oak King and the Holly
yeah,
King?
yeah,
Awesome. Cool.
yep. And that's why earlier when I was talking about hanging the king on the door, and she said, I didn't know whether you would be bringing in, I suspected you were bringing in the Holly King and the Oak King, but I didn't want to jump ahead. And
No, that is so cool. That's awesome. The Oak King and the Holly King are definitely I don't know, a part of a lot of people's practice, especially when it comes to the way that a lot of people celebrate in the Western world. And I've always loved the Oak King and the Holly King. I think it's a really cool story. I think that it gives a lot of people a lot of room for reflection. And it also shows off really well that because you have to explain that it's the Holly King that is dying.
right, exactly. It's that duality aspect.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people get confused between that cycle of who is dying and who is regenerating. And, that, like you say, it is the Holly King that is dying now.
Yep. Exactly.
Whereas most people would associate this time of the year with, it being the other way around.
Yep.
And if you get to educate people, no. We're out of the period of darkness now. We're going into the period of light.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think a lot of people get confused. And it's one of the most, especially when I used to teach classes, like with my friends, and we used to do this in person back when the early days of divination. One of the most things that I got asked, and like one of the biggest questions, was that people always thought that the winter solstice was about darkness. And,
No,
and
yeah,
it's not.
no. And it's often, I think, because we think on a Julianic calendar as
Yep.
opposed to an astrological calendar. If you do it by, as they would back in the day, by the seasons, it makes more sense to you to interpret it and to be able to share it with others. Whereas most people associate this time of the year with darkness and cold and so on and so on. Well, yeah, it is, but we've gone past that peak now.
Exactly.
And even though technically it's the middle of winter, well, it's the middle of winter for a reason. Just like we have the middle of summer for a reason.
Exactly. Exactly. And a lot of people, when it's the middle of summer and it's summer solstice, and you're sitting here telling them that the Oak King died, they're like, what
Yeah.
do you mean?
Hey.
And yeah, so it's a really easy way to kind of personify the explanation of what we're actually celebrating and the confusion that people get in 2024, because nobody is sitting there at the summer solstice thinking about the darkness that is coming, because they don't have crops and they're not farmers and they're not worried about the cold or not having food or not having crops to grow.
Right, because traditionally that summer solstice is when you start prepping for the winter.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's when everything that you've done in the springtime, you know, if you talk about the different harvests we have as pagans, we don't just have one harvest a year.
Yep.
It's like grow. Okay, my best example I have of this to somebody is grow lavender and then start harvesting your lavender and then reharvesting your lavender
Yeah.
and reharvesting your lavender.
Exactly. Or even things like mint,
Yeah,
which is the
exactly.
same thing. Yep. Or
Yeah.
like lemon balm, which is also mint. It just tastes different.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But you know, the fact that we have. Okay, I'm going to bash on modern pagans here. I don't care. It's uneducated dimwits that are spreading false information on TikTok and witch talk and all the rest of it. Which this is part of the reason why I stepped back from social media
Mhm.
because of the frustration and the anger and it affecting my own mental health.
Definitely.
If,
Me,
if it's bad for my mental health, then I'm no longer servicing it. I'm no longer feeding it.
yep. No,
I did, you know, if you notice, November, I was nowhere to be seen online. Nowhere.
Yep.
You know, because it's just, no, it doesn't serve me.
Yeah. I totally feel that.
Like this.
I feel that a lot. Okay.
It doesn't serve me.
I am going to take you guys with me. I'm going to take one little bowl and then I'll come back for the other bowl because I can't carry my giant iPad and my bowl at the same time. Okay. So we are going this way. Okay. It's probably cold, huh? I didn't really think about that. It's fine. Okay. Oh, it's not that bad. It's not that cold. Okay. Cool.
Do not drop the iPad.
I know, right? Okay. So actually, if I come on, here we go. And we have my archway. I don't know if you guys can see my little archway. And this, oh, you guys can hardly see it because there's no light, but there is a gigantic tree right there, and that's the one we're gonna be decorating. And you guys, this is where I do all my ritual stuff. Okay, so we're gonna sit here, and then I'm gonna put, okay. So if you guys have stuff, go ahead and put it on the tree. And I'm gonna set the camera up like that, and I'll be right back. Okay. You guys can feel free to talk and stuff if you don't have things to decorate. And I'll be right back with my other bowl. One sec. Oh, it is kind of cold.
Should I clear out a bunch of snow? Maybe clear some of it out, yeah. Oh, wait.
Did you just get some?
Well, I got something over right here. Come right over here. I think maybe we're just a little off. All right, let's try again. Right here. Definitely that rock is definitely setting it off.
Okay. I have my other two bowls. I'm gonna go decorate the tree. I'll be right back again.
That'll work. Nothing's going on.
So you want to bag it?
Might as well. Yeah, I mean, it's got char marks on it, or what looks like char marks. I don't know if this is just mineral makeup of this rock, or if this is pieces of that charred RV that kind of melted with the rock.
Then you can get to 15,000 degrees. So if you think of what that could do to an RV,
Yeah.
if it hits the right part of electronics or ignites part of the fuel, like in my mind, yes, it is a bit of a fluke that the entire thing burned down, but it's not completely unexpected, especially when it's kind of on an isolated hilltop like this.
He also said that was burning too, so I wonder if it's actually closer over here somewhere. Let me just go check that area one last time. That sample's over here.
I'll get one last one of this one. Big hit?
Oh, yeah, right here. Ooh, there's a big hit, right? Right there.
Going.
Alyssa,
Oh,
Alyssa, I've already been out there and given him his 15 minute. He's looked.
well,
Where are all the dirty towels in the house?
yeah. Yes.
Are they in your room?
No.
I think we've only got one towel, Alyssa.
Can I use them?
Yeah, but you better bring it back. Otherwise, you'll be doing. Sorry, you weren't supposed to hear that.
Oh, that's okay.
So, will you be discussing
That's when it just kind of makes you wonder.
traditions from Arabia as well
Yeah.
tonight? Yay!
Yes. Okay, so oops. Oh well, that's fine. Okay, cool. So I went out and decorated the tree. I didn't have my cool string, so I kind of just had to like place things around the tree. But it works, and the birds will still be happy. So you guys kind of got to see my house and my porch. All right. So did anybody else go out and decorate anything?
Do you want me to share my recipe for my nutrition, as I call them, the nutrition bars for the birds?
Yes, I would love that, please.
Okay, so it's flaxseed, sunflower seeds, peanuts, almonds, and pistachios.
Ooh, that sounds really good.
Chop them up, like really not like super fine. I mean, I suppose you could grind them. You chop them up into small pieces, and then you mix it with honey.
Nice. That's what
You're
I
using,
do too. Yep, I'll mix
yeah,
honey in there too. I did that tonight too.
yeah. Mix it with honey till you get a real like super sticky, sugary emulsion, and then you take literally a 9 by 13, and you put that mixture in the very bottom of it, and then you get hot tallow, so hot fat from bacon, from your meat that you've been cooking and saving up. You gently heat that up, you pour it in, put it in the fridge, you let it set, and then you cut it into small bars, poke a hole through it, tie a piece of string on it, and just hang it. Hang it everywhere, on your fence line, in your trees,
Oh, that's
throw it on the ground, throw it in the woods, take it with you when you go for a walk, and you drop some everywhere for everything, and just let nature take its course. It
I
gives them
love.
the energy, gives them protein, gives them sugar, carbohydrates. Good for them, good for Mother Earth.
No, that's awesome. That's such a great idea. We've done a lot of different ways too. We'll do like after Dia de los Muertos and Samhain and stuff, we'll cut up the pumpkin and dry it, and then we'll hang that around during the solstice, during winter solstice, so that they can have dried pumpkin. Number one is just kind of something to do with the pumpkin that we don't cut up and eat, because I don't like just, obviously, if you just let the pumpkin rot outside, the animals will also eat it. But I figure it's nicer to cut it up for them.
But something else we did this year that we haven't done ever before, and Alex is going to chuckle and smile at this: pomegranate and watermelon.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. That's funny. I love that.
And you know where that comes from, especially the watermelon side of it.
I know, I was gonna say, I mean, I know where the pomegranate side of it comes from too, if I'm right. Like, obviously, pomegranate is a huge symbol for
Yep.
for winter solstice and for the underworld, and then obviously, watermelon is a huge symbol for the winter solstice as well. So that's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah, I got the watermelon from research that I did with regards to something I did, and you know what I mean.
Yes, yes, I do. Yes. Wow. That's amazing though. That's really cool. That's funny.
And it's also quite funny that nuts play a large part in this time of year, especially
Yeah.
from your heritage.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Exactly. And I think too that a lot of people, like, it is quite fun to me.
Alex, Alex, say it as it is. Come
Well,
on.
no, I was gonna kind of segue into just kind of telling the story of winter solstice from Lebanon and from Syria, and from other Arab countries and Arabic countries. But I always found it funny that, okay, so you know how obviously we just had a conversation, a very long drawn out conversation, which is beautiful, about the similarities to Abrahamic religions and paganism when it comes to the celebration of winter solstice. And then we also talked about why that is, and that it's not just the fact that all humans happen to have very similar spiritual outlooks on life and ways of celebrating the times of the year. And no, it's not. It is a little bit of that. There's a teeny tiny twinge of that, but mostly it's genocide and colonization and conversion. And we kind of discussed that and talked about that a little bit. But also, I find it quite funny that people don't look into that more. That people just kind of assume that it must just be that ancient people just celebrated very similarly to Christians. And they don't think about that a little bit more, because we're just segueing into discussing and talking about the Middle East. But it is funny that Jesus, according to Christians, was born in Mesopotamia, Bethlehem, which is in Mesopotamia. Does anybody know where that is? Because that is in the Middle East, specifically an Arab country. And so realistically, this isn't where I was going with this, but funny enough, Jesus is an Arab refugee. Interesting. Anyway, but also the evergreen tree, which did not exist in Bethlehem, because evergreen trees are not native to the Middle East. A lot of tropical trees actually are. That's actually a common misconception. Thousands of years ago, obviously, the Middle East was the Fertile Crescent, and it was a very, very tropical area with tons of tropical trees. But it was not a pine forest, and it was never somewhere where pine trees were native. So that's very interesting. And all the stuff that has to do with the pine tree, the worshiping of the pine tree, having the pine tree or the evergreen tree, because there's also the spruce tree, and there's many different types of pine trees / evergreen trees, but none of them are native to the Middle East. So all of those traditions are not Middle Eastern, and they're not Arabic. Even though Christianity technically started in the Middle East. Anyway, so we are going to discuss and talk about how people, specifically from Lebanon and Syria, that's where we're going to focus on, because the Middle East and Arabia, ancient Arabia, is not a monolith, and they do not all do things the same way. And so we're specifically going to talk about Lebanon and Syria. And Lebanon and Syria, specifically those two countries, are two of the oldest civilizations to exist ever. You also have some scattered throughout North Africa and other places in the Middle East, but Lebanon and Syria are some of the oldest civilizations to have ever existed in the entire world. They are some of the very first places where you ever see humans start to settle down and create huge, gigantic, beautiful civilizations. And also one of the birthplaces of human culture. One of, not the only one, one of the birthplaces of human culture, of spirituality, and of the celebration and worship and tracking of the seasons, the sun, and the stars. Now, we also see some of the very, very first times people do that throughout North Africa as well, and throughout many different places throughout the Middle East and North Africa. But if you want to talk about one of the very first places to ever celebrate winter solstice, it would be Lebanon and Syria. One of. And the way that they did it, I know, isn't that awesome? I think that's awesome too. One of the ways that they did it was, I don't know how many of you have heard of winter solstice and summer solstice being the festivals of fire and the fire festivals. But if any of you know about the ancient tradition of fire festivals and how that's used in Greece to celebrate the winter solstice, and used through Greek mythology to discuss and talk about Demeter and Persephone. Yes, I figured you did. But that comes from across the Mediterranean Sea. For those of you who don't know the geography, which is totally fine, no judgment, but we have Greece in Europe, you have the Mediterranean Sea, and you have Lebanon. So there's Greece, Mediterranean Sea, Lebanon. And so Lebanon and Greece, both being extremely old places, shared a lot of traditions. And so anybody who knows a lot about the ways that thousands and thousands, probably about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, how winter solstice was celebrated in Greece was very similar to how it was celebrated in Lebanon. And Lebanon started a lot of those traditions, and then it moved through Greece as people started to migrate into Europe. And settle and create civilizations in Europe, because that was much later, after the civilizations were already happening in the Middle East. So we have fire festivals. And one of the things that they would do in Lebanon, specifically during the winter solstice, was light huge, ginormous, gigantic bonfires. And the bonfire would represent the sun and the many, many different sun gods and goddesses that they had throughout the different types of spirituality that were around that time. You were starting to see the beginning of Zoroastrian spirituality. For those of you who don't know what Zoroastrian theology and spirituality is, I don't have the hours. So we will do classes on it. It's a long story. It's a lot. Look it up. Don't trust the first link on Google. Spend some time looking it up. Maybe get a book. But Zoroastrian spirituality is very cool. And you're starting to see the beginning of Zoroastrian practices in Lebanon during this time. And so they would create big, large bonfires to welcome in the sun and to celebrate the sun and the different deities that represented the sun. And of course, you would have huge, giant feasts, and you would have the final preparation to get ready to finally being able to work on the land and till the land and get ready to finally in the spring being able to plant plants and to plant crops and for things to start growing. And so what they would also do is it was also a time to celebrate and say goodbye to those who died during the winter and those who didn't make it through the winter. And of course, these traditions are much, much older than Celtic traditions. So a much larger population of people were dying during the winter because number one, it was mostly due to drought and famine that they were dying. Not necessarily how cold it gets, because it's not going to get as cold in Lebanon as it would in somewhere like Ireland, where it gets much, much colder. But it was still drought and famine and not being able to eat and lack of water. And so this also became a death ceremony. But something special that they would do that kind of separates them and makes them different is number one, is all the things that they didn't do. So in the Middle East, you are not going to see the worship or recognition of the evergreen tree. You are not going to see the recognition or celebration of any of the typical plants that you're used to from Europe and from the Western world, such as the use of holly, such as the use of, because that wasn't a thing in the Middle East. I'm sure holly existed. It's not that it didn't, because like I said, it was a very tropical area where you could grow many things. It's just you don't see holly being used in any of their celebrations. Also, a lot of people were like very different things would be eaten, because in the Middle East, they had very different animals and very, very different crops. So you would not see them eating anything similar to what they would have been eating in Ireland or Europe in the Celtic traditions that we're all very used to, especially in America. And you also are not going to see, let me see, pretty much to anything. The colors red and green, which are very, very Celtic, you are not going to see anything like that. So anyway, what you do see is the bonfire, the death celebration. This is when most people were buried. You see the burial mounds and the very focus on cremation and death. You also see the ash from the bonfire being used to basically take the ash and to cover yourself with it to help yourself communicate and become closer to the dead. They would have death rituals where they would communicate with, and there was a lot of necromancy that happened during the winter solstice, because now was the time to say goodbye and to communicate with them. The veil was thinner. You still see this idea of it being a transitional period, so the veil is still thin. And something that they would always, one of the traditions was to wear white. And they were very, because this was kind of the beginning of Zoroastrian spirituality, you started to see the elements being used in ritual practice in the Middle East. So they were, in order to bless the dead, to say goodbye to the dead, and to help them on their journey, they would use earth, air, fire, and water. Because earth, air, fire, and water, and the use of earth, air, fire, and water as spiritual elements that represented metaphysical ideologies started in the Middle East. For earth, air, fire, and water. They were doing different things in Europe at the time. It was not earth, air, fire, and water. That was a Middle Eastern thing, until it moved to Greece. You would also then see the jinn. And the story of the jinn, which I thought was really cool because it's very similar to Robin's story about Lithuania, but there was a multiple, so they didn't necessarily have a specific name for her. There were multiple jinn who would disguise themselves as old women, and they would appear injured, poor, starving, and the people who came and helped them gave them shelter and gave them food, or even just asked if they were okay, gave them any gave them any empathy at all. They would get gifts from the jinni that they helped. And so the jinn have been around forever. We actually don't know. Like they keeps getting older and older. I think now we've discovered that they're probably like 6,000 years old or something. It's insane. They're older than civilization. Anyway, but the jinn are a part of every single celebration that happens throughout Lebanon and Syria. They have been a part of every pagan celebration. So the jinn are a huge part of the winter solstice celebration that you see. The jinn help the dead to make it to the afterlife. And the afterlife looks very different depending on who you are. There was no like one monolith belief about where you go when you die. That wasn't a thing. There were like thousands of different beliefs about where you go when you die, but nobody really cared. It wasn't like you can't celebrate with us because you don't think you go to blah 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 when you die. That wasn't a thing. So there were just thousands of different beliefs about where you go when you die, but they all had one. They all believed that the jinn helped you get there. Wherever it was that you were going, the jinn helped you to get there. And so they would bring the jinn to celebrate with them, to drink with them, to eat with them. They would cook for the jinn, give offerings to the jinn. The jinn was the one who gave gifts. And what I think is pretty funny, I'm not so sure if I would go as far to say that Greece took this from the Middle East, and that's where we get what we know today as pagan Santa, because there's a whole Celtic story behind pagan Santa, okay? And obviously Odin, but Celtic pagan Santa is way cooler. But anyway, the jinn, the old woman that would give you gifts, she dressed in red. And not only did she dress in red, but the all jinn, the way that you're able to tell that it's a jinn pretending to be a human is they usually have like some animal part on them, because the jinn aren't very good at persona or impersonating humans, so they always kind of have like a little piece of animal attached to them. So if you've heard the stories of different jinn, a lot of times they're like half camel, half woman, or half snake lizard with like the hair of a woman, or whatever it is. They're usually half animal, part human. And the old women that were jinn impersonating old women would also usually have the fur on their legs of a goat. And most of the time, this fur was white. So you have the woman dressed in red with white fur who gives you gifts. And this was going on 5,000 years ago, which I think is pretty cool. I'm not necessarily saying that's where Santa started, but still very interesting.
If you look at the coloring of Santa, especially in Europe and America, that's actually due to the Coca-Cola company. It was
Yes.
all a marketing thing, because before that he was traditionally seen in green, brown,
Yep.
earthly colours, and then Coca-Cola came along and said, "Oh, let's make this jolly old chap wear red."
Red
And
and white. Yep.
ta-ta!
Yes. You also do have stories in Norse mythology of Odin wanting to be celebratory and dressing like holly. And so he wears holly, which turns, which is red and green. But yeah, there's lots of different things, but Coca-Cola is the one that started like the red jacket with the white trim and the little hat with the white trim and all of that. Yeah. But yeah, so she was half goat, kind of. She had goat fur and part and a woman with wearing red. And I always found that to be quite interesting. But anyway, and so they would spend most of the night giving offerings to the jinn. And it is said, because once again, the Middle Easterners, the Arab people, really, really liked writing things down. So if you would like to go look this up, that is what's fabulous about Arabic and Arabian mythology and lore. The only hard part about it is not that it doesn't exist, but that you have to sift through all of the colonizing religion stuff. So, you have to sift through the Islamic stuff. And you have to get past that to the pagan stuff. And that's actually really, really hard to do because those countries have been colonized by Islam. And so they make it very difficult to find any information pre-Islam. But the Arab people really enjoyed writing things down. So unlike the people of Ireland and the people of Norway, where a lot of times during my classes, I say we just kind of don't know, and we're making a lot of we're inferring a lot of things, we're kind of making a lot of really educated theories and guesses based on the artifacts that we have found and the archaeology that we have done and the things that were written down. That's not the case with ancient Arabia. It was all written down, all of it. They had specific people who were in charge of writing that down, of writing everything down. Every single thing they did every single day was written down. And it was somebody's job to write it down because they really cared about this stuff. So these are things you can go look up, and it's very easy to learn about all of it. Anyway, so in this literature that they have written down, when they write about it, it doesn't sound like the Fae or a lot of entities from other cultures, where it sounds like they're giving offerings to kind of a form of a deity or something that you cannot see, or kind of a demigod, things that are more, they exist more on the other side of the veil or in the astral plane, or they're kind of veiled by reality. The jinn are not written that way. It's written as if these people were sitting down for dinner with their bestie, who was a jinn, who was a jinni. And they're sitting down for dinner with their bestie, who's a jinni, and they're all having dinner and talking and having a great time. It's not written as if they exist on the astral plane. It's not written as if they exist beyond the veil. It's written as if they are at the party and they're interacting with humans and touching humans and having sex with humans and partying with humans and eating food and drinking and getting drunk and all these things. Like, it's written as if the jinn were really there for real. No. And when they make their altars that are dedicated to the jinn, they're not putting out food and then taking it a few days later and saying that, the jinn ate the essence of it. They're putting it out and fully assuming that the jinn is going to come get it, because the jinn really like bread and butter, and the jinn's going to come eat it for real, for real. So it's very interesting. So they would celebrate with the jinn, have parties with the jinn, get drunk with the jinn. They had big sex ceremonies where they decided that obviously, since so many people have died, mostly children, the way to remedy this is obviously to have a lot of sex during the winter solstice, which makes sense, you know? So they had big sex ceremonies during the winter solstice, and they would have a lot of like half jinn, half human babies during the winter solstice, or they would have sex with jinn and then get pregnant with half jinn, half human babies during the winter solstice. So yes, it was a giant death ceremony filled with fire and sex and jinn and drinking and food and being really excited that the sun is coming back. And oh, and right, and the old lady who gives you presents. So that is the story of Lebanese and Syrian winter solstice.
That was awesome.
Thank you. I'm so glad you think so. I think so too. I think it's really fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. By
Good.
the way, my apologies for missing your last class. I really wanted to see that.
Oh, that's okay. Don't worry. It'll be on YouTube soon.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, I really want to start getting that done. More videos up tomorrow because I have the next few days off. I have until January 2nd off, which is approaching very quickly, but hopefully I can get some stuff done.
Awesome.
Yes, so it will be posted.
I do still watch the videos and I rewatch them, especially since I'm forgetful. So the more often I watch them, I remember a little bit more each time.
I totally get that. I'm glad you watched them. That's good. Thank you. I'm glad. I need
Yeah,
to
I even watch your really early ones. I guess like when you first started out.
Those ones are fun.
They are.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording and then we can like, hang out and keep talking, but I'm just gonna stop it so that